yeah, so I guess that's the notification. I guess we can go on and get started on if you guys are ready.
Okay.
All right, cool. So, welcome. I guess this is a presentation.
Oh, the seminar already sucks. Just kidding.
Well, then, get the hell out.
No.
This is a presentation on dungeoneering and dungeons and dragons and yeah, except we're not playing League. So yeah, so if you go on ahead and go to the PowerPoint presentation, which is the first slide's really just logo.
They're turning it off already.
Got it. So, all right. If you go to the first actual slide, the thing that says reason. All right. So when you're making these dungeons, you know, for whatever reason, there has to be a reason for the players why this thing is here. Whether there's an item inside, or maybe a mage is running rampant and you have to go in and silence him, or if you know, maybe a druid or even something. I don't know. Maybe you were contracted to go in and kill some monsters. But anyway, there has to be a reasoning why you know, the players want to go into the dungeon. Not only that, but if there is a person that runs this place, say it is a druid and, you know, he just wants to be left alone, but he's also causing a plague to spread through the land or whatever else, there has to be a reasoning why he's staying in this dungeon or why he built it. So for the players, you know, why do you want them to go there, or why should they want to go there? And for this, what I call the patron of the dungeon, why do they want to stay? And you know, again, sometimes it doesn't have to be anything big. You know, treasure and glory are enough sometimes. Any questions so far?
I don't think so. I mean, really, this is all about context, so it makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Like you know, oh, there's bounty down in this dungeon. We need to take care of it.
Yeah.
There is people disappearing, and
or maybe
for some reason
sometimes
there's a bunch of weird rats.
So
or maybe sometimes you just.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Or maybe you just want to go down there just because, like, just because it's there.
Yeah, because players will find reasons to do it. And so, the surprise part of this presentation is not really much of a presentation, because along with this, we're going to be technically creating a dungeon. So with the first thing being reason, why would you want players to go into a dungeon?
Well, I guess it really depends on the context of the adventure.
Well, let's make a context then. Let's
Right.
say we're dealing with a primarily good party.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the basic standard adventurers, maybe with like one neutral who's like going to backstab everyone, probably. Who knows? So we say they're good adventurers, and let's come up with let's say they've heard. Let me think of something. Like maybe
rumors, or like maybe they got charged by a dude, like or dudette, saying like you gotta.
It could be that they're chasing a bounty for an evildoer that's been kidnapping people, and they found the clues and they found the location of his lair, and they're here to take in the bounty and save the people.
Actually, there in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there actually is like a table to figure out like what's the reason for this dungeon? Why is it here?
Okay.
Stuff like that. What? I'm curious, like what this dungeon might have been. Was it constructed by the bad guy? Was it like a former castle that got like brought together by like the bad guy? Like the kind
was it a sewer?
Yeah, was it a sewer or is it
a sewer currently, and he's just hiding in it like the Rat King he is?
It's up to you guys. How do you want to do this dungeon? What is the reasoning
So
for this guy, for the players wanted to go in, but also why a potential patron is in there? Patron being
Actually,
whoever.
let's see. Who would this guy be?
we could go with maybe a necromancer that's experimenting on people with different forms of magic.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I don't know. Like, what if we did something different than that? Like that's usually kind of like there's like this scary guy in there. Like I'm trying to think of like,
Hmm.
let's see.
So something other
Maybe
than
it's a
just go in and stop the mage.
maybe potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's a dungeon that is maybe the patron of this dungeon was a maybe this dungeon was like sort of once a great sort of temple and that only opens up in certain parts of the year.
So it kind of has its a mind of its own.
Maybe that's my idea.
Okay. So what would
What
you
do you think,
guys
Dan?
for this presentation like to use as the patron?
Well, that's cool, but I think I'm also thinking we should do something simple for this presentation because if we go too deep in something, we'll be creating lore. We're going in too deep. I think
Nothing
I don't
wrong.
know. It's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Do you want to go with the idea?
Nothing wrong with creating lore potentially.
I know. It's just
I mean, I guess it depends on time, really.
yeah. Let's think. That's a good idea, but if it's a temple, where is the temple located?
Well, that's the thing.
Is
Is
it
right now we're going to work on reasoning. Why is this dungeon,
okay?
or why is this patron? Why is this structure here?
So why is the structure? I think the temple thing would be a good idea.
Okay.
That's why the dungeon's here.
It was like a massive complex. Like it used to be like a big old complex, but then people either might have like maybe cloud giants came down and like took all the people away, and now there's nothing left but their empty alabaster like ruins
Like
that don't seem to be affected by time.
there
And
could
like,
have been a religious crusade because you know how good and evil are with religion. They're like killing each other,
and
even if they're
True.
good.
what if there are like constructs in there, and they're like they were it was almost kind of like what was that Studio Ghibli movie?
I mean, we
Castle in the
could.
Clouds.
There's also the fact we could do that the patron punished the people in the temple for great sins and killed them all. Now it's a structure untainted by time or people, and it's been falling apart.
That's a lot like Sunless Citadel. You know Sunless Citadel?
Nope.
Actually, no.
Oh, it's a classic D&D adventure, and it recently got put into the Yawning Portal book.
Ooh,
Oh,
cool.
okay.
What
But the
like I
same.
was like if we're yeah.
Mhm. At the same, this is just kind of like to get in the feel of the presentation. At the same time, why are PCs going there?
Um, maybe just because there's like not a lot of people have like they've heard like rumors about it, and it's kind of like there's like booty in it.
Okay, so the treasure and glory aspect, yes.
What about you, Gand?
Uh, well, like, what's the reasoning we're going for again for why it's here? I
Why
think
it's here?
is it the punishment or religion reasons or like storm giants? What are we going for here, Phantom? For that,
I don't know. Again, well, this is a I don't know really. It could be those things, or maybe a combination of all of them.
or maybe no one really knows, and these are some of the myths about a place.
That's a possibility.
And the reason why they're here is because a historian may be hiring them along as protectors, to research the reason of why the people disappeared.
That's gonna be interesting. An escort mission. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, going into a
Okay.
dungeon with a NPC to study the place. So is that good?
Yeah,
And they
I'd
find
say so.
treasure along the way.
So they
Yeah, booty.
treasure, glory, and knowledge. Those are really big ones because that's what some people even pay for is knowledge. And so yeah, okay. So right now we
Knowledge.
have the patron being complex itself, and it was there for whatever religious reason or for whatever reason. Okay, so I want you all to move to patron, if you would. The next slide.
All right.
All right, and this is kind of a generalized thing. I forgot to put on here, the patron could either be alive or dead, but the patron is the person that either procured or built or whatever to this dungeon. He's the reason why this dungeon is known. He's the reason either why the players want to go there or the players don't, depending on how your party is.
So
and
we got.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
You're good.
Go on.
I was going to say was that the patron, pretty much as described, says it sets up the theme of the dungeon. So if it is a religious cult, maybe there's going to be religious markings. Maybe you're not going to deal too much in traps. You're going to deal with more with monsters. Or if you are, it's because it used to be an old restricted area or something along those lines. So the patron is the guy that sets up the theme. This is the guy that when you're building the dungeon is either like the final boss or someone that is there to kind of designate why this thing is here. Because there has to be someone. The patron can be a group of people, it can be one person, it could be no one in the sense of it is a living dungeon. But even then, sometimes a living dungeon has to have a reason why it's living. So yeah, that's why the patron's here. So, yeah.
So the patron, like, I think we already kind of decided that wouldn't be like the historian, like, there's some sweet booty up in there,
Well,
sweet knowledge.
the patron.
I think this is more like who made the temple,
Right.
or who's in charge of the temple.
This is focusing more on the dungeon itself.
So, what god would this temple be for? Because how we want to go about this feels like it would be like not a nice one.
Maybe a lawful neutral one.
Yeah.
So you have like Pharasma and Saren Ray you can deal with in this one. Cord, if maybe like it's due to punishment based on maybe someone had screwed up an Olympic game or something along those lines, or tried to sabotage it.
We could also go like forgotten like D&D and have like Primus, the god of absolute law. What else? Let's Intersea Faiths. I know there was this one goddess who was like the goddess of machines.
Mm-hmm.
No, not Grotus. No. Where are you? I'm looking. It's her name. Her name was something. She was a big old. Oh yeah, Bray. She's basically the neutral goddess of clockwork, invention, and time.
Okay.
Well, she's neutral, so that might not be good.
I mean, you never know.
Neutral.
Sometimes that could be that could help set up the theme, while the people maybe that were worshiping her maybe thought something else and maybe went off in a different direction with her teachings. It's all about, really, when you're dealing with religion, you take different portions. Sometimes the fanatics take over, if you will.
Yeah. Maybe like the fanatics, like maybe like a bunch of brave fanatics like camped up in there, and then but thing is like but being in there for so long they kind of became messed up machines, like semi-cyborg, like they grafted cybernetics on them.
So we're doing the machine god. You know what else it could be?
The Omnisaya.
Because this god, like, because people are trespassing in the temple. The ancient machines that used to protect the temple have become, hostile to anything that enters due to the fact, either due to their how you say it, like the internal systems being messed up, that they no longer can see from friend or foe besides themselves, and they start attacking the party for trespassing upon their god's ancient realm.
So once they were more or less protectors that were watching over this this big dungeon, and people have been long gone, so they take any people right now as a threat, sort of thing.
That was one idea. I had, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's a mixture of both. Maybe there's some robot cultist dude. Maybe there's some cybernetic cultist dude, and like maybe the cybernetic cultist the cultists came in, they confronted the robots, the mythical constructs, kind of got wiped out by them, and their bodies were used to make like cybernetic like servitors.
Okay. So
That could
like
be one thing.
we could even throw them in
And
like
like they're the
separate
two things
portions of the
together.
dungeon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like a machine cult as well as protectrons. Okay. So and those that's an example.
Like Modrons or Inevitables.
Right. So pretty much, and along with that, there's different examples. Like a wizard is a typical dungeon trope. Not a bad one, but still, they're commonly used because magic is versatile. Druids, whether it's an ancient grove or crazed cultist, is another one. So, which is sort of what we're using as an example. Typical monster lair, go in and slay. That's an incentive. And then you could even do an Enclave for Humanity for a Path of Evil campaign. So, whatever reasoning, the patron can be part of the reason why the players are coming in here, but definitely is going to set up for the theme. Now, please switch to the next slide.
Theme.
And so this is where really the meat of everything is. Besides the patron, because the patron kind of bleeds into this subject of theme. Theme is the design of the dungeon. You're not really going to see in big mythical ice places a typical portcullis, or in a swamp. You're probably not going to see an ice giant. So the theme is determined by the patron's purpose and style. Why is the patron? Why are they there? In this example, they're there for religious reasons, for this machine, for this cult of the machines, or not really cult, but religious group, and also cultists that maybe believe that they're not worshiping the right way or whatever else, and there's an internal battle. So not only does it set up for the design of the dungeon, but it also sets up for like how everything's used, like these simple encounters. You're not quite going to get too much evocation magic, or you might even from a rogue, unless this rogue just knows people that can use the evocations or use illusions or whatever else. And so really, in thinking of theme, you have to go back to the patron and kind of like, okay, why is this here? Why is this here? What could they use? And where would they place this map? There's a reason for it being here. So like maybe this, since this place was a cathedral of sorts, or a religious grounds, maybe they didn't want to put it in the mountains because that would suggest some kind of seclusion, or underwater for mysticism and secrecy. Maybe they would put it near a town, or maybe it was a run downtown, or. But when you're thinking about placement for this dungeon, because that follows within the theme, and that follows within the patron's design. Everything kind of comes back to the patron.
So I'm gonna say this: due to them being a cult of machines, some people might say, maybe the temple should be out in the open. However, this is a different type of religion,
right?
Based around machines. My idea would be like thinking about it in the mountains, not for secrecy, but for the fact that this mountain had hill, like this hilly valley or mountain had a large ore deposit, which allowed them to forge new machines.
Yeah, or even near a volcano for the molten core, and to kind of build off that perspective. Okay, that makes sense.
That makes sense. I mean, having it like discovering it would be like almost thinking like almost a very like Vault 101 type thing. We have to find like this the big old like sliding door that you gotta like pry open somehow.
And along the way, they will be given notes because they'll be seeing things like chimneys raising up from the ground, great chimneys, like forges, like abandoned mines. And even some remnants of protectrons protecting those mines and things.
Right.
Or even
with the
Do you think we
style.
should make the Protectrons like the main enemy and like the cultists like the side enemy?
Yeah.
All right, I would write that on a separate thing. So Protectrons and Cultists, I'll put those over here because we're actually going to cover that. But for right now, where would you guys want to put this dungeon? Where is this thing, given the patron and given given the theme?
Oh yeah, we said the mountains.
Mountains,
Yeah.
so it's confirmed mountains? Okay.
Yes.
So mountains because of the ore deposits and whatever other reason. Maybe because they need to get to that get to molten lava to fuse whatever. So what about the design of this place? I mean, would it be cogs? Would it be you know, would it be cave
I was thinking
drawings or you know?
I was thinking like sort of a very let me bring it up. It's you know Warframe, right? And the
Yeah.
and the nodes
Mm-hmm.
and like the void dungeons.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'd say almost like kind of like that, much more sleek, a little more clean,
Well,
and
like
with
when I
mixture
think
of gears as well.
when I see Warframe, I will admit, while it's good design, it feel unless the setting is a bit more sci-fi in origin.
I mean,
I
like
feel like
it doesn't have to be exactly like that. It, like you know, it would be like maybe just for inspiration, like sort of the colors and sort of like and sort of like the colors. Like this used to be a great big temple for an ancient civilization. Like it's not obviously not like you know like super advanced
What
and everything like that. But like they had
about the
they at least had like yeah.
what about the Dwemer from Skyrim for inspiration? Because that's
Oh yeah, maybe maybe a mixture of those two things.
Yeah, so maybe
Yeah.
they have their like you know, even though it's like nice and sleek or however you want to make it look, as well
based
they
off
incorporate.
cogs and steam.
Yeah, they incorporate that into their halls and the beauty of the flowing
Like
machine.
like Art Deco. I believe the style that they went for with like a lot of the architecture was like Art Deco.
Right.
I believe.
Okay. So we're gonna go with like the typical. I mean, not typical, but like the flowing machines and like you know you can commonly see these throughout the halls and all that. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, so you can see the machine workings. So now that we have the theme and the style and why this thing is here, let's move on to the next big portion. And I realized that for some reason the PowerPoint shifted down for I don't know why, but we're going for resources.
I'm hearing some smacking sounds for some reason.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Um,
I'm
That's
having
right.
my dinner a bit late.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
good. So this is actually where we're going to have the resources. I mean the protectrons and the cultists. So you know, basically the resources are like who's funding this thing. Is it someone that's running solo, or is it someone that's you know following a baron or some kind of deity? And we've already determined that's a deity. And really, this regulates the. It kind of says like, okay, this guy has this much in his budget, or and you know, so that way you can fit this in as an encounter or that in as an encounter. Um, so like maybe there is a pitfall into a gear grind trap or something along those lines. Cause that's simple, and they already have it in their portion. Or if like you're in a sewer, you have a pipe fall or you know something simple, but you know whoever if they're not working for the sewer system, they don't care what happens to the sewers. So this resources, of course, given with the theme, given with the patron, are kind of going to be where your big encounters are going to happen. So it can be like creatures, like even if like, well, why does this illusion mage have goblins? That doesn't, you know, that would be more like Bernie or whatever. Maybe he captured them or convinced them, or there's always a reasoning why something is there. Or if it's you know traps like with the gear grind pitfall, you would have either this person knows how to work this machinery, such as, well, a cult of machine would, or a established religion of the machine, so as to not call them a cult, to not offend anyone. There's a reason.
I thought because of how the Protectrons are, we do know the cult will be in conflict with Protectrons, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like they basically I'd imagine they would be basically pretty much like attached, like they basically literally would be attached to like basically be enslaved to the to the Protectrons themselves.
Okay, so
That's what that's my idea. Like that would be basically.
I just thought of something. Besides the the enslaved ones, we have those who are still free of mind outside, still fighting the Protectrons outside, like not in big groups, but like we'll see remnants of it, like fresh battle around the entrance probably.
Right. So that
and we'll see like their bodies being dragged in. Yeah.
Right. So that going back to theme, that would be the design portion of it, and maybe with the resources, that could be a resource because traps are nice.
By them with the entrance probably as well.
Right. So with that,
I think on the resources at the very least that since it's like a factory and everything like that, like kind of like a factory temple built into like the a mine. I'd say like at the very least in the concept of this dungeon, like at least in the current at the current moment, like the resources are kind of in a sense limited only to really how much like they can mine at one time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. The question is also how long has this thing been here? So how much resource would they have right now?
Left.
Because as a
I was. I was thinking like maybe that the temple would the like since the temple's been there for a while, there's still like maybe like dormant like countermeasure machines or like stuff like that that could be like that could vary depending on your imagination. They could be huge giant colossi or like elaborate built-in traps of like all sorts of mission mashing.
Or even with the battle at the beginning. Sorry, go on ahead.
Before you go on, I was going to say this, and heck, there could be signs of the robot still mining and making more Protectrons. So there could be even fresher looking ones.
Okay, so maybe they have the threat of an army. And maybe that could be a big good plot twist later. But even with the as Gan mentioned, the fighting at I think it was Gan that mentioned it, the fighting at the gate. Sorry, my memory shot right now. But the fighting at the gate, with that you have traps. When you think about the design and the theme, you have traps based on that. Maybe they're well, I mean, wow, everything looks pretty torn up. But something could have pounded the ground and you instantly have a pitfall, or maybe a beam could slide across the floor because it's just barely hanging onto the ceiling, or so really it's good to develop the theme beforehand, so that way you can let your theme determine your traps. You don't even really have to do any thinking. You can just say like, okay, what would make sense that would happen?
I think the traps would be very much mechanical. Like they would be a part of the temple itself. At least most of them. Maybe there was a couple like ramshackle traps built by like the cultists here and there.
Okay.
Like that just recently put in. That's my theory anyway.
That makes sense.
Right.
And maybe they could be in certain portions that they wouldn't think anyone would show up, would be simple ones, like a simple bell tripwire system. Because simple is always a good thing to fall back on, but yeah, but considering and this could also set up for puzzles, because like there could be like a tile flipping thing where it's kind of like, you ever seen the Clockwork Mansion from Dishonored 2?
I have not yet. I need to finish Dishonored 1. I've been finishing Dishonored 1, and you have to get up to Dishonored 2.
Tile flipping, all I remember was putting tiles in order that represent the name of the name on the statue from a very old game called The Hobbit in 2003.
Well, that's the thing is, you can use and don't be afraid to use inspiration from like other games, because if you have a passion for something, obviously you like it. So use similar things. Like even if it doesn't fit a theme, write it down, use it for a different one. Or even like I had a wording. It was there's a game I was playing. I cannot remember the game, and I can't really explain the puzzle too well in case I want to use it. But basically, I found one in an old game I was playing, and I made a dungeon a while back, or I might have made one for the future for you guys. Haha. Hint, hint. That would that didn't fit the theme, but all you have to do is tweak it a little bit to fit the theme.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. So, the puzzles would be mechanical. Everything would be based on this. So the resources that they have are the metals that they can use. So the drafts, as you said, would be more mechanical. The design would be more fluent. It would be more thinking of gears. If this happens and this happens, then this happens. So you don't even have to have like a two-part trap where trigger and then effect. It could be a trigger, effect, then side effect. Maybe someone steps on the wrong panel, and not only does their tile go under, going with the pitfall, again, maybe the entire bridge for the rest of the way goes. So they have to figure out how to reactivate the bridge or something along those lines. So now that we've gone over creatures and traps and freedom of design is really kind of like, given how, like, where this thing is and all this, you can we already decided it's going to be a mountain. So when you're thinking about a mountain, mountains are big, tall, they can be wide, but they're mostly known for being big and tall. So typically when you're building in a mountain, you could build down or build up depending on how low you are on the mountain set. So freedom of design is referred to as kind of where they can expand this thing. Kind of like if you're in the middle of a town and if you have a mansion and there's no one around you, let's say you own the town, you can expand wherever you want with this thing because you have plenty of land.
Going back to the theme real quick, I just thought of something.
Mm-hmm.
What type of temple was this? Was it a grand, big temple? Because it sounds like what we're going for here, like a temple that would have been like, the cathedral for entire region due to the fact of how the mines. Would this be correct?
It could be.
Guys?
Say that one more time?
A cathedral, like a huge temple, due to how we're just talking about this.
I think it would be kind of like a complex with multiple rooms and chambers. Like I'd say they go down into the mountain.
All right.
Yeah, and you could have
Let's
big
make
portions.
Sure because we'd be seeing a lot of chimneys.
Right, and you could have big portions that would be, as Gan said, that would be big and grand cathedral. But you could also have like those side rooms. Like, okay, well, while they're not worshiping, why should we make this side room big and pretty and all of this? So we'll just make it a simple slate rock or whatever. Or if they're working with metals,
or quarters for them.
Right.
Make it sleeping quarters.
And that goes along with the theme of like, okay, they had the intention of building this thing maybe as a cathedral, and then it just so happened to have ore. So later on, they started making a more a complexy build, a factory type build later on, or maybe they incorporated that in with the big pretty designs, and we're dealing with like a Warhammer-esque, big, beautiful, just everything. So
I like the idea of having a big, beautiful everything.
Okay, so they're going to work on pleasing their patron while they're working. So yeah. Okay, that works. So moving on from resources, we're going to go to mapping, and this is so you have these big, beautiful rooms, and we've already discussed this. We have the big, beautiful rooms. We have the tiny rooms. Now it's all about like placing them. I use mostly the DMG for this one, for as a resource for this. Avoiding symmetry is always a good thing. You don't want the map to be, one hallway.
I mean, I think it kind of depends. I think it kind of depends, like depending on what the dungeon you're thinking of, like what the context is.
Yeah.
Of the dungeon.
But it's kind of symmetry. I don't mean like each room.
What if we're going to a temple to the goddess of symmetry?
Yeah.
Like the God of Order, like what would the God of Order want like a temple that might be like pleasing to it, like that is like symmetrical and orderly?
Exactly
Well,
the same people would be walking through the exact same time where you.
well,
My God.
here's the thing. I don't mean symmetry isn't like like square rooms are fine, that sort of thing is fine. What I mean is like because there's a room on this side of the dungeon, there has to be a room that looks exactly like on the other side.
I I don't know. I think that I don't I'd say avoiding symmetry is kind of limiting in my opinion. Like it's like saying like honestly with dungeons your imagination's the limit. So having like I feel like avoiding symmetry as being a rule seems kind of weird.
Well, I mean
Like
like as an overall because it kind
I
of
I think it sounds like to me it's like you don't want to face the same thing twice in a dungeon across the other side of the dungeon. Like, okay, we fought the same things in this, there's the same items in this. Then we have another room with the same enemies in it with the same items in it.
I don't know.
Why?
yeah
For some reason, that might be an interesting that might be an interesting mechanic. Maybe I don't
yeah.
know. Like that. That
But
sounds
I mean
interesting.
yeah,
But you
I,
don't.
I
But
mean
it's
like
also
all
the
the
fact
time.
of repetitiveness. Like if it's like if there's like I would say you don't want to avoid symmetry all the time. You want to avoid it to a point where it doesn't feel repetitive. You don't want to
Right.
have more than two of the same room, and you only want that to happen once. Because like
Right.
if you have it like two of the same room, like different room, like they're different rooms. Of course, like yeah,
What I
two
mean
sets of the same room.
what I mean by avoiding
I
symmetry
mean,
is like it would make an interesting concept, and symmetry is not a bad thing. What I mean is like in every dungeon, kind of like if the players see symmetry, they're only once they explore half the dungeon. There's to them there's no reason to explore the other half because they've seen everything. Um, what I mean is like exact symmetry. Like if there's a reason for it, like maybe it's a barracks and maybe they just made it straight down the middle. Okay, this side's like this side. That makes sense. But what I mean is like every dungeon, every room has symmetry to the other side of the complex.
I'm confused. Like I'm confused. Like so you're again. So you're. I'm confused. Like I'm a little confused.
What
Like
I'm
like are you saying like the dungeon should be like of the same shape on each side, or like are you saying like
what I mean is like
Same setup, same enemy
same
setup,
setup.
same
It's
item setup.
kind of like a butterfly. You think of a butterfly. You have you look at one wing. It's nice and pretty. It's great. Then you look at the other side. It's nice and pretty, but it's the same as the other wing.
Let
Just
me.
just
like
So,
like
opposite.
like are you talking about like architecture, or are you talking about like
we're talking.
like stuff that's in the room?
I
Oh
would
no
say
no.
N
I'm actually talking about
or both.
architecture itself. Um,
I personally disagree with that. Like because like there's a beauty in symmetry, and just because it's symmetrical doesn't mean that they might not have there might not be different things in there.
right. No, I mean for like every dungeon.
For for me, I took it as this. You don't want to have the exact same enemy placement or layout or items in each dungeon while also not keeping the same room size. Not the same layout, not the same architecture. We're talking about like each room, like is it the same size? Like if it's like each dungeon, it begins with 10 feet wide, 10 feet long, and that's how each dungeon begins. That can get
Right. It's kind of like
repetitive. That's some.
Phantom. I agree with you. There really is. However, when building a dungeon, players are looking for players want they want random. They want to be they want to explore. They want to find out what's next. And what I mean is like every dungeon every dungeon's different. And that's what I
I
mean
just
is. Mhm.
I'm having trouble like are you saying that all like symmetry and like everything is like in dungeon like is bad, or like
No. I mean, like, if you take the entire dungeon's layout. Like, let's say, okay, if you draw a
but
square,
like
then put a
but
line in the
like the
middle of it. Hmm.
like I don't know, like I feel like saying like just avoid symmetry like architectural symmetry altogether is like
Oh,
I
no, no,
feel is
no.
kind of limiting, and that kind of
Well, I mean, not altogether. Like, what I mean is, like, if you do symmetry for every dungeon.
That's what I'm trying to say. I just got kind of confused because you said avoid symmetry, and
oh no, there's nothing wrong
seems
with
like an absolute symmetry.
No, there's nothing wrong with symmetry. It's just you don't want to do that for every layout of every dungeon, because
Well, yeah.
once the players feel like they've explored half of it, they go to the other half, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I guess we're done here, because they've already explored.
Right. Or it could be like, well, we know there's going to be this ultimate guy that will nearly kill us, just like last time. So, goodbye. I'm done.
Huh.
Let's go
Like,
back
I mean,
home. Still over like 29 claves.
like, I mean, just because there's like enemy, like, I don't know, like I feel like having like enemy symmetry might be an interesting mechanic to look into for dungeons.
Yeah, but I mean, like as a mechanic, yeah, if it, especially if it fits to like a very specific specific type of like I've done dungeon, I've did a simple goblin tunnel, but because it's a goblin tunnel, uh, it can't be, you know, a go down the tunnel. There's a place to the left, and then a big circle room, a place to the right, and a big circle room. And then there's there's stairs in both big circle rooms that lead to the same place, that meet up in the middle, that branch in the exact same place. It's just because symmetry doesn't meld well with themes and planning out like big architectures, like there's always that hidden room or whatever else, and that it kind of takes away from the exploring aspect, because if there's symmetry, there's no you wouldn't think that they would put hidden room on one side and then not the other, or put neither one of them having hidden rooms, because it doesn't, there's no point in making two hidden rooms in two different sides of the complex. Basically, the only thing that with symmetry is not necessarily that I'm not saying it's a bad design, I'm not saying anything like that. It's just, as a player, when you delve into a dungeon, it's just like, oh, well, this side's the same as this side, so let's just explore this side and get out of here.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it really depends on the player, really.
Yeah, true. I'm just going with a kind of a general, I guess, response that I've received from players. I'm not saying that there aren't players out there that don't want to do symmetry, especially if it's used as a mechanic.
Yeah.
For me, it depends. If it's spread out, then sure. But if it's repetitive, then it's like, or if it's spread out and we've done it so many times, it's more like, can we have a different layout, please? But yeah, I think we get the basic idea of this when we talk about avoid room symmetry.
I guess the reason why there was so much confusion, I guess, like, it just, I don't know. I guess there was some confusion between us all. I guess, for like the wording that we were giving each other.
We took different interpretations of it.
Yeah.
Well, like, what it meant to avoid symmetry.
Right. It's
so.
Yeah, and again, there's nothing wrong with symmetry. I personally have no problem with symmetry. I'm just kind of going with what the I kind of just agree with the DMG on this, that every dungeon shouldn't be exactly, one half is exactly like the other. I'm not saying that you should never do a dungeon like that. I'm just saying that yeah. But yeah, that's just what they were recommending, and I have agree, but I respect your opinion on it, and I have the same opinion when it comes to symmetry. I think
I hope I didn't sound like I was being, like, I guess, defensive, I suppose, really.
No, you're fine. It's a discussion for dungeons, and that's sort of what this is supposed to be. It wasn't really. I said seminar because that's the first thing that came to my mind, or presentation because that was the first thing that came to my mind. I really wanted it to be a discussion, but coming from the symmetry point, there's another thing that's also really interesting, that I actually disagree with the DMG, and that is to place dead ends in blank rooms. Because personally, and not like completely blank, I mean like, bookshelves and all that stuff. You can make a study and just put absolutely nothing in it. And the reason why is because it makes the players explore a little bit, and it kind of gives them that, like, okay, well, there apparently there are places in here that maybe we could investigate, and there's not much of anything. So don't make them think that there has to be something in every room, and like dead ends in a hallway. I just, to me, this is honestly because I think it's hilarious. Whenever I see a player like sit there at a dead end, like there's got to be something here. It's like, no, it's just a dead end.
Also,
that's always nice to have.
Also, if you're using a map template for Unreal 20, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good idea to change up how the dungeon is and looks.
Mm-hmm.
Because because sometimes you need a dead end, and it's not just that. You also don't want it too open. You want a dungeon where they have multiple paths, yes, but you don't want one with too many different paths.
Right. No, I mean like
they'll be probably exploring for 20 sessions.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, like when you're mapping these, like not with a template, but actually like scribing these. And to be honest, the first thing that I do with a map before I actually think of like, okay, I want the final boss to be this, or I want these items to be in here, or whatever else. The first thing I think of is map layout, and then I fill everything in from there. I'm like, well, maybe I want to add this room or whatever. But to me, mapping is once you have the theme and once you have your patron, mapping should come like immediately after. And then you write down like, okay, what do you want this to look like? Or why do you want this here? Or like, oh, maybe I can put this monster in this room. Maybe there's jail cells in this place. Maybe they did their own law and order at this religious compound. And maybe there's secret rooms. Maybe some people were hiding things from others. Maybe that was just the beauty of mechanisms, is that there's some kind of deception to them, and they use that by making deceiving rooms within other rooms. And it's just kind of following the formula. Once you have your theme and your patron down, and once you have the location, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. You have the map, and then you just start drawing, and then you make sense of it as you go. You can put things with intention in there. I'm not saying you should just go random willy-nilly, because there are some sections that should have reason to them. But sometimes sometimes, like, especially if you're making like just a random dungeon, don't be afraid to just do a corridor that splits off into two different corridors. One of them's blank. One of them's just a square room. Maybe there's a secret in that room that leads you down to another hallway, or even downstairs. They didn't even know there was a second layer. But kind of give the players something to explore. Make it you can make it random. Because random dungeons, I've tested this with with Skip before, and like I found a random dungeon generator, and it didn't make any sense to it, but it was just like they were checking everything, and like, okay, well, this monster's here, so why is this portcullis here? And they kind of made sense of it as it went. Granted, there wasn't any sense in it because it was random. But at the same time, there kind of has to be, because why is this portcullis here? Maybe it just does lead to a dead end. Maybe once you've scribed it in, you can put a backstory in there later. But when mapping, don't forget you can put secrets in. And this is one of my opinions. Oddly shaped rooms promote interest. Squares and circles are nice.
Look at this trapezoid-shaped room.
I mean, yeah, especially if you do like a cave-like pattern, because it's something like, okay, why is this like this? Like, one of my favorite things has always been cave dungeons. Just looking at them, because it's like, okay, nothing like fits within the squares. I can, oh, well, there's an enemy coming. Oh, well, we're stuck in a hallway. Well, like, if you're in like a really weird shaped room, like, well, maybe I can just slide into the crack and hide from them, or something along those lines.
Maybe there's people coming up. Maybe I should climb up to this stalagmite and hold on to it and stealth.
Yeah, only to realize it's a piercer, and then you go down with it. I mean, and so like at that point, sometimes you just have to keep drawing. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes your mind just let it go. Just it just let your head go, have fun. Maybe you map out another room over here and like, okay, I want to put this in the dungeon somewhere, but for now I'm just going to draw random blocks. And then you can make it, then again, you can make sense of it later, put in segments of the room or put in a puzzle. So that's when mapping, it's definitely up to the GM's discretion. I mean, obviously, all of this is up to GM discretion. But mapping is one of those things that, personally, my favorite thing is just go crazy and just go have fun. Like, okay, this hallway goes here and yada yada. So, obviously, we can't really map the example dungeon. But so we're going to go on to the next slide, which is placement of said resources. So we've already thought about what resources should be in here. All right, we've kind of had it in the back of our mind as we were mapping. Maybe we made random lines, and later we make them make sense. So this is really where we plan. This is really where the meat of the dungeon comes in that the players are going to see. So this is the floor planning stage, as I like to personally call it. So when you're doing this, you really have to think about, like, okay, what does this patron want, or like maybe the backstory of this place. So we've already said that there was some kind of battle between machine cultists and these protectrons. So we're gonna have faulty ceilings. So you can scatter them here and there, mainly. But with that, we put that in mainly battle heavy areas, or maybe like on the other side of the wall. Sorry, go ahead.
There's also the fact we came up with the idea of them being very ancient protectrons, and you're also making new ones.
Right.
So the very older ones could be on the outskirts. When you go deeper into the dungeon, we're fighting the more newer, not rusty ones that are much more tougher than their older, rustier counterparts.
Right, and this is really where
newer
theory.
Designs.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can go into the reverse. Like we see the newer, fresher ones coming out, and like the more ancient, more even like more powerful ones are down below.
Yeah. And they go in and play cards.
Either or.
And they go in and like, okay, you guys can take a break.
I challenge you to a game of sorcery.
Oh god.
They play Yu-Gi-Oh, and like on motorcycles, they just like the whole thing is literally just like like the inner workings of this temple is literally just a racetrack, and they get on motorcycles and play Yu-Gi-Oh.
Because of how because the older ones being more powerful makes a bit more sense, because the older ore must have been mined out by this point that they're using any ore they can to protect Trons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it makes sense just to put the more powerful ones like deeper in. So like because like you don't want to waste waste your power like at the start.
Yeah.
True.
Like
but
you set like you. Plus, it's good for the dungeon itself. Like it's a power ramp.
I really love is seeing you guys bounce back and forth with this, because that just shows the differing of minds. When building these dungeons, you can place the resources however you want, as long as it makes sense in your world. And I'm not saying that you guys are arguing. I'm just saying it's good that there's that differing, because it shows that dungeons are different. Yeah.
Yeah.
It shows that dungeons are different and creations are different.
You could have like roving monsters. You could actually have a roaming like mega monster that like appears in different rooms. Like sometimes the characters might have to fight it, like potentially.
Yeah. Or if they're smart, run.
It's less of a power creep, more like it's more like less of a power creep, more like there's a potentiality things get even more difficult.
I think, well, that's a good idea, depending on the player's level and how smart they are, because I think it might be better to say something for that for the last, but that's just me.
I mean, it really does kind of depend on like the intelligence of the players. I guess when doing these maps, you should also pay. Yeah. You should like think about like how intelligent are your players? Like, do they just go gun ho into everything, or like do they think out and plan out things first?
But at the same time, you want to give them a challenge to the opposite side. Sorry.
Yeah.
But also, since we're on the floor planning stage, what is the final thing they face? Because we know they're to be facing like Cerbertrons, maybe remnants of the Mechanicus machine cult, the Protectrons, but what's the final thing? Could it like? Because we also go back to a bit like. It's who's built are we fighting the Protectron that's building these Protectrons, or are we facing their most powerful Protectron yet, which guards the final room?
That's when we actually go back all the way to the beginning, and that's for the reasoning for the players being there. Maybe there isn't any. Maybe the challenges up to this point have been enough for them to realize there are a lot of these things. Maybe they actually see the machine, because not every. Dungeon bosses are a really great and wonderful thing. Not every dungeon needs to have one, but they give with that context of the patron being there, like maybe even the patron isn't even the final, and that's a good thought in having a what I like to call the big balls minion, show up and say like, so I see you're in town. And then just try and wipe, and then have a boss fight with a minion, but he's a little bit more than a minion. So really that it goes all the way back to the beginning in the reasoning why the PCs are there.
But yeah, you could turn something differently, discover a new reason why they're there and what they can do next afterwards.
Yeah, the ending could just be they discover the treasure, or maybe the ending is literally just a mega trap.
Yeah,
a mega trap,
a super trap, a trap to end all traps.
Like, also, when I think mega trap, what I was thinking was not just a trap, but also a boss fight. Like if they can go past it, but if they accidentally activate it, the wounded and hurt party or still standing party, depending on how good they are, be up against probably one of the most powerful Protectrons in the dungeon.
Oh yeah, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, the one that protects the ancient relics.
The boss is the room. Maybe the boss is the final room.
That'd be interesting, seeing a Protectron's head come out of the wall.
Maybe the final thing is just like that last piece of knowledge that they need to get hold of, or for it, like if the guy that's following them is showing up, maybe it's like, okay, that's enough, we can go back now.
That's a possibility as well. Like, they don't have to complete the dungeon per se to get their final goal.
Yeah, they can just get. It depends on how far they want to go, because they can get the knowledge they want and get out, or if they discover something more, they can advance to the end of the dungeon and face whatever is causing these Protectrons to keep on going, or they find a room with ancient relics, and there's different ways you can do this.
I'd say, like, for this boss, like this dungeon, there like the fact that there's so many combat and there's so many like robots here, I'd probably imagine there'll be a mega robot somewhere down at the end that protects the final stuff.
And that's very potential. But
I imagine like them that when people have like the language, this ancient people, and it reads on a door stuff. The final stuff.
And let us consult the tome of the sacred tome. You suck.
But
that's the one where without the final page, the book keeps on writing itself. The final page, like before you die, it says you suck.
Yeah.
That's a harsh book.
But yeah, so when you come up with these things, one of the resources that you can place again is that patron. Whether it be a giant mech head or nothing, maybe the entire point, maybe the entire point of it was just to get a book. Maybe both at the same time. Maybe the book is like.
You mean the sacred tome?
Yeah, this is the sacred tome of Get Good. Maybe it's implanted maybe it's implanted as a data chip in this big mech's head, and it's and maybe like a fusion of puzzle trap, monster, and item nab. Maybe this thing is like maybe you can't approach it unless you do a certain thing, and if you do it in the wrong order, then it will activate a trap, and it's just all these different things that could occur. And if you do something different, then something different happens. But when coming up with dungeons, you want them there. Maybe there is really maybe it's just exploration. Like, okay, maybe the guy that follows them just says, okay, I'm done. You can take me home now. And sometimes that can just be the end. Maybe he's just figured out enough where he's just like, okay, be gone. Here's your money. Go. Because sometimes dungeons don't have to be a big thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, or really he's too scared.
Or
He's
at
chicken.
the final bit, or the final bit before like they find something very like the final door. He says he gives you the money. He says, "I can handle this on my own now. You can go," and that could also lead to a potential boss fight right there because you know how some people are in the
like you can't tell me what to do, chia.
Yeah, and that's that's building NPC. That's for another discussion. Building NPCs and whether they be important or anything like that. But yeah, that's the placement of resources. I'm gonna ask you guys to go to one more tab, and that's
no, just kidding.
Well, there's another one after that, but this is
No,
second last tab. Oh, shut up.
Testing your dungeon.
All right, and it's
Test your dungeon by killing people with
like I've made one recently. Whether I'm going to use it or not, I don't know yet. So I had my friend Zin. He tested it out for me. Not tested it out, but he went through it and he's like, well, what about this here? And never be afraid of like criticism if someone says like, okay, well, I don't quite, as a player, I don't know if I would like this here, or I just don't know if it really fits, or you say, okay, well, do you have any suggestions? That's a good thing. Or like if you have any extra players lying around, because they just lay there limp until you say get up and try this dungeon. You can tell them to.
That's silly.
Well, yeah, you take them out of the storage locker that you put them in and sit them down at the table and make them play. But anyway, you sit them down.
Your waifus and husband knows out to get testing this dungeon. Get the whip out if you need to.
Yeah, because like
husband knows usually you're lazy.
Yeah, it's got, but like there's actually a 17 floor dungeon that I know a guy that runs it yearly with a different. I think it's with different groups, or he just picks it up and continues it. But sometimes to play D&D, you don't really need to have a story. Sometimes you can just go right into a dungeon and just start hacking and slashing. And sometimes the dungeon has enough story in it to where it doesn't even need to have a main story. And of course,
you learn from it from just looking. Not being told it from like an NPC. You just look at it, or in this case, a historian will tell you some interesting tidbits, but you learn more about what's been happening recently through the actions of the Tectrons and the cult.
Right. It's kind of like
probably scary.
Right, and you go in blind, and if you see a bunch of bodies laying around, like someone murdered these people, or they, it's simple.
You see their bodies being dragged, really.
Yeah, maybe this thing's happening right now, or maybe this thing is an ancient dungeon. This happened a long time ago, or whatever else. But when you're building these dungeons, think in the mindset of the patron, because maybe they put their room in a hidden place because they want that. Maybe this dungeon was built because of seclusion.
This is a temple. They could have. I'm not making the joke. Never mind. What?
Sex dungeon.
Make a joke.
I mean, and if you would go to the final slide, please. And these are just some final notes and some last insights, I guess.
Final notes.
And don't be afraid to change things last minute. I'm just gonna read these verbatim. You're a DM. You're only human, so mistakes are allowed. Players want to play. Nothing has to be perfect. There's no guidelines for perfection. They just want to play a dungeon. If they didn't want to sit there and play or play anything, if they didn't want to sit there and play, they wouldn't be playing. And if they are, then ask them why they're there. And finally, when you're and this is a big thing, and I know it's not really a big thing for inspiration, but when writing for traps or puzzles, be certain to chart exactly how they activate, what they do, if they reset, and the DC for detecting them. Because depending on how lenient or harsh you are as a DM, if a trap goes off and someone's like right behind the person that hit the trap, maybe it was an arrow trap. It's like, well, I didn't want them to be affected. Unfortunately, that's something that you don't want to figure out last second. You want to say, okay, well, they're in the line, so they would be affected. And you want to chart out your traps and everything, the reasoning, the mechanisms, because sometimes, like, one person stepping on a trap, well, he was a mushroom man. He weighs, like, 2 ounces. Maybe it has to be a certain weight limit, or maybe tapping on it with a 10-foot pole isn't enough to do this. So, yeah. And sorry, Gand.
What?
Oh, you were saying?
I was going to say something. I was going to make a joke about, you could have a trap that no matter what they do, even if they held it, I don't know. I was trying to think Gary Gygax, but my brain's.
Oh, even if they did it exactly
Mine weren't.
how it's written down in the tomb, it sets off anyway because maybe the guy before them,
Yeah.
Maybe he was a dick, or maybe he was the patron. So, in a final note, just we went over over the reasoning for both the players to go to this place and the patron for the reason why this place is here, the patron themselves, whether it be the dungeon itself or people within the dungeon or whatever, or like a single person, or Gary Gygax. The theme of the dungeon based on the patron, the resources that are available to the patron and that would fit the theme, mapping, because it's more of a random process unless you don't want it to be, and then the placement of resources. And that's the more or less the presentation. If you guys have any questions or comments or whatever else.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, it makes sense.
I was gonna say something that I like that. Unless the traps were recently made, like this keeps coming up my head. I like when traps fit the area it's in. Like,
well, yeah.
I think I told you both of you know about when I made a sewer dungeon. The pipes were where the traps were. Like arrows came out of the sewers, or someone put a freaking flamethrower in the pipe out. They never activate. They never came close to it. But alas, that was one of my favorite bits I made.
Yeah, and that's and definitely use your preferences, because if you don't like what you make, no one, regardless, you have to like what you make. I know that the players are gonna, they're gonna play it, and
it's not realistic enough.
Well, who cares? Nothing's realistic in life. Wait a minute. But yeah, it's just, as long as it makes sense to why everything's there, and or even if it doesn't make sense, maybe the guy that made this place was a whack job. That it happens.
Or maybe he was just a big troll.
Or a literal troll, and he just has no idea how to build things.
Or he was Gary Gygax.
That is racist.
Took everything into account.
I mean, if it was Gary Gygax, everything was placed meticulously, and everyone will die. That's just how that goes. So, yeah. So that's sort of my personal insights on dungeon building, and
that's the way the news goes.
And that's why they call it the blues. Yes. I just want to thank you guys for listening.
I was glad I was here. I was glad that I was here.
I was glad I was told about this last minute. I'm happy.
I posted on the Discord. I posted on the Discord.
It was?
Yes.
Oh god, it was. Yes. I need to pay attention to Discord more. I need to write my freaking backstory for Jerusa. I forgot about so many things. I'm a GM. No one wants that I GM 2 games.
Yeah. I mean,
you GM 2 games. Oh yeah, you do. What am I saying?
Yeah, you're one of them, man.
Well, yeah, duh. Like I know that. It's like for some reason the number didn't cross me for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's
It's 1.5.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I was gonna cut the
Go on.
recording, and say thank you again.
Is the recording being cut?
It
Thanks.
is.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll cut it. I'll cut it now.